Lovely. Are we recording now?
As far as I can see, press start record. Yes.
Yes, we have. Lovely. Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Schools Forum. It's 5:16. Apologies for the delay in the start. I'm sure everybody heard what was going on. We'll try and make sure that if we are YouTubing it next time that we start at 5 o'clock. So let's get straight into the agenda. So the first item on the agenda are apologies for absence. I've received none. Are any members aware of any apologies for absence today?
Okay, there's Tracy Oust, Harinder Patar, and I thought Stephen Davis, but he seems to be
Ewan Ferguson as well. John sent
Lovely.
his apologies this afternoon.
Great. So we're recording three, Tracy, Harinder and Ewan, if that's okay.
Right.
If Stephen's here. Lovely. Okay, moving on then. Are there any declarations of interest necessary for today's meeting? If you could demonstrate a declaration of interest by putting your hand up. Okay, running through, there are no hands up, so if we can record that as no declarations of interest for this meeting. And then the third item is any other communications from members. And I need at this point just to draw everyone's attention to a communication that came to me initially in November and then in February this year regarding trade union facilities agreement with the London Borough of Hounslow. This was raised first by Karen, our local rep, and then by the regional rep. And the communication raised a number of concerns around current TU facilities arrangements. The first was a concern around a rising caseload. The second, a reimbursement around the reimbursement scheme in which the London Borough of Hounslow reimburses at a fixed rate, currently UPS 3, rather than the actual cost of the officers. Concerns around the officers' workload balanced against their trade union duties, and then a request for adjustment to payment arrangements to cover the full costs of officers be tabled for Schools Forum. That final element, Schools Forum cannot directly change trade union facilities time. This is a role for the council and unions directly, and so that request has been forwarded to through to the council officers. And then for the benefit of this meeting, to just inform everyone that trade union facilities time was recently discussed at Schools Forum, came up on the 3rd of December 2018, following a letter received from the NEU and NAHT regarding the inclusion of academies in local facilities time scheme. And arrangements that were then in place with the London Borough of Hounslow were shared as part of that item with a recommendation to review and update. And indeed, the London Borough of Hounslow union reps and Schools Forum reps formed a working party, which then reported back on the 2nd of March 2020, this time last year, and trade union facilities time came back to Schools Forum. There was an updated facilities time schedule, and this was noted by Schools Forum. So what I'm proposing on that communication is that we forward the concerns and the request for changes onto the relevant council officers, and I believe that's already been done. Okay, lovely. All right, if we can then move on to agenda item number 2, which is minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of January 2021. So if we turn to the minutes in the agenda pack, that's page 3. If we go through first for accuracy, so if we could go through on page 3, would anybody like to raise anything on page 3? I think that's a no. So if we then go through to page 4, anything to come up from page 4? No hands up. Page 5. No hands up. Page 6. No. Page 7. Page 8. And page 9. Okay, so are we happy for me to accept these as correct minutes of the meeting of the 18th of January? And I'm assuming with the silence and the lack of hands that we're happy to record those as an accurate set of minutes from the last meeting. Lovely, so that takes us then through to agenda item number 3, which starts on page 10 of the agenda pack, and that is the 2021-2022 early years budget and hourly rates. And I believe, Shelley, you're going to take us through that. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, John.
Thank you. Shelley, I don't know if it's just me, but your sound is appalling.
No, I just had that myself, and now it's okay. I don't think it was my end, but
Can I suggest everyone else mutes themselves?
Okay, I think we're good to go. This report is really to feedback from the consultation with the early years providers on the 21-22 early years budget and the proposed hourly funding rates as set out in section 4 of the report pack. And it talks about the proposed 21-22 early years budget as set out in appendices A and B, and the proposed 21-22 hourly rates. Anita, are we on the right slide?
So I've just put the early years block slide up. Can you not see them, Shelley?
I don't know if it's just me, but I seem to be on the title page, Schools Forum.
Yeah, it's still on the title page on my
Right, let
screen.
me just try and move it on, because it's moved on my screen. So let's just... Can you see anything now?
No,
still on the same.
Shelley, for time, can I suggest you make a start in the pack, if that's all right? If the notes you need are in the pack, and we see if we can get the slides to catch up with us.
Sure, I'll just continue. Right. Okay, so just to recap, the main points from the proposed budget were an increase of 1% for 3 and 4 year olds for the hourly rate, and a 1.3% increase for 2 year olds. Sorry, not the hourly rate, this is the entitlement, this is the funding allocation that we received from government. And then in terms of the proposals for the budget, an increase in the hourly rate of 6 pence for 3 and 4 year olds from £5.53 to £5.59. Continuation of the deprivation supplement at the existing hourly rate of 27 pence. And an increase in the hourly rate for a disadvantaged 2 year old free entitlement from £6 to £6.08 to maintain the SEND inclusion fund for early years at the previous year's total of 741,000, and to include a contingency of 357,000, which is backed up by an underspend on our provision, which currently is estimated to be in the region of about 600,000. So that was what was put out to consultation. Consultation began on 19th of January and went through till the 9th of Feb. There was a written consultation paper, a virtual provider briefing attended by 24 providers, and 4 responses were received. Broadly speaking, they were supportive of the proposals, but there were some concerns which were noted. One of those was government funding for free entitlement places does not cover the cost of providing the places. Increases to funding rates of 1% and 1.3% don't match increases in the minimum wage. Take up of fee-paying places is reduced, leaving providers with less income to offset the cost of offering free entitlement places, and central staff pay award for Hounslow was 2.75, and it was felt that was higher than the hourly rate increases. I mean, the response to that particular point was that the pay award for council employees is determined by the National Joint Council for Local Government Services. But broadly speaking, so the general sentiment was that the council had achieved the best outcomes with the budget that was available, and therefore we should go ahead with the proposed hourly rates. In the report pack, there is detail on Appendix A for the full budget breakdown for 3 and 4 year olds and 2 year olds. Also, there's a paragraph around the details behind the 357,000 contingency. And just to note that if this is not spent, if the contingency is not spent, it can be held in an earmarked reserve as usual to fund clawback of early years funding, higher than budgeted take up of places to support the 22-23 early years budget, and of course potential quite significant pressures that might arise from the latest Jan 21 census data being used to provide a final 2021 and 2021-22 funding allocation. So, if those census numbers are down in Jan 21 and the future funding is based on that, that could lead to a significant pressure. So the provision and the contingency will certainly potentially be needed. Just recommendations. Schools Forum is asked to note that the feedback from the consultation with early years providers on the 21-22 early years budget and proposed hourly funding rates as set out in section 4 of the report. Note the council's response to the feedback from the consultation is set out in section 4 of the report. And note the proposed 21-22 early years budget as set out in appendices A and B. And note the proposed 21-22 hourly rates as set out in para 6.1. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Shelley. Has anyone any questions or comments for Shelley at this point? Charlotte.
Ask whether or not we already have early indications of what the census is saying.
Not at this stage, as far as I'm aware, unless anyone else knows otherwise. I know that the census data is nearing completion, but I don't think anything's been formally put forward yet.
Should I just come in there and say that we're still just cleansing the data that's come in? We are nearly there. So apologies, Charlotte, but very soon. We will know very soon.
Okay, thank you.
Looking
forward to seeing what it says.
We hope.
Thank you, Charlotte. Anybody else wish to come in at this point? No. Okay, in which case, if we can go then to the recommendations. 4 things to note. Shelley's picked them out. They're on the screen now in front of us. So the feedback from the consultation with early years providers on the 2021-22 early years budget and proposed hourly funding rates set out in section 4. The council's response to the feedback from the consultation set out in section 4. The proposed 2021-22 early years budget as set out in appendices A and B, and proposed 21-22 hourly rate as set out in paragraph 6.1. I think we can cover those all off in one go. So I'm going to assume that we're happy to note unless somebody raises a hand otherwise. Lovely. I think that deafening silence and lack of hands means that we've noted. Thank you, Shelley. That's great.
Thank you.
So if we move on then to agenda item number 4, that is a finance update. Now we've only got the appendices in the pack, so I imagine the rest is what we're about to see on the screen. Shelley, is that you or is that Christine?
Hello, John. It's Christine.
Hi. Lovely. Are you happy to take that on then, please, Christine?
Yeah.
Thanks.
So the finance update, I hope, will come up on the slides. So the first point of it deals with the allocation of the schools block, which we discussed at the last meeting. So at the last meeting, we agreed a growth fund. We agreed that we submitted disapplication requests regarding additional lump sums for Sparrow Farm and Springwell School, and we agreed minimum funding guarantee at 2%. So if we can move the slides on. So all of the distribution of the schools block to individual schools is calculated on this what's known as an APT return. So we submitted that to the Education, Skills and Funding Agency on the 20th of January with the disapplication requests. The 2 disapplication requests were approved. When you submit APT returns, the funding agency does a series of validation checks on them, and we get queries that come back, and there's a bit of toing and froing between them and local authorities until we get to a final agreed APT return. One of the validation checks highlighted that the NNDR figures for Hounslow didn't look right, so we checked those and we found that the estimated NNDR for a number of schools had been input incorrectly. So we've had to correct that, which has caused some changes to the distribution of the schools block. So hopefully the next slide will bring picture up. So this is the slide we had at Skills Forum in January. So the NNDR feeds into the non-pupil based elements of the formula. So the amount of NNDR was incorrect by £130,000. So that had £130,000 difference between the non-pupil and the pupil-based allocations. So that's on the next slide, please, Anita. So the total schools block remained unchanged. There was £130,000 more went into the bit of the formula that's distributed between schools. And there was 130,000 less in the non-pupil part of the schools block. So that had an impact of reducing OPU from national funding formula rate of national funding formula plus £42 that we presented in January to the national funding formula rate plus £6, as we had less funds remaining after we distributed the funds through the school formula. So the minimum funding guarantee remained at 2%, but 68 schools rather than 60 schools now benefit from it. The in Appendix 2 of in your pack, you'll see a schedule that shows what the provisional allocations we calculated in January were and what the final ones now are. So most schools' funding allocations have remained unchanged, but where schools had incorrect NNDR input in January, that has now been corrected and their funding has changed. And also the 8 schools that are now affected by the minimum funding guarantee, their funding has changed a little bit. Can we go to the next slide? So the figures now in Appendix 2 are the final school allocations. Appendix 1 is the final formula factor values, and we plan to issue funding certificates to maintain schools by the end of this week. Is there any questions on that before we move on that anybody wants to ask?
Don't see any hands up.
Okay.
Christine, do you want to carry on?
Yeah, the next thing to alert you to is the long-awaited review of the high needs national funding formula has now started. So there was a consultation paper was published about 2 weeks ago, and it closes on the 24th of March. So this consultation is focusing on how the high needs allocations to local authorities are calculated. So if you go to the next slide, Anita, please. So this is the current high needs funding formula. I don't know how well it comes up on your screen, but the consultation focuses on the first of the grey boxes, the historic spend factor. And it is also looking at the proxy factors, which are sort of indicators in the population that might cause pupils to have SEND. So if we could move on. So the consultation is asking questions at the minute about a number of areas. The historic spend factor is currently calculated based on estimated spend for 2017-18 financial year. And there's a proposal to change that to the actual rather than the projected spend. The historic spend factor currently gives you about 34% of your funding, and there are proposals to increase that. And they're also seeking suggestions on any alternatives to the historic spend factor. They're also consulting on what to do about the attainment element of the formula, because there's no exam data for 2020, and also seeking suggestions on potential changes to the proxies for SEND and a need for alternative provision in the population. So that is the first of what we expect to be at least 2 consultations. The indications are at the minute that changes to historic spend factors might come in for next financial year, but not expecting additional changes for 22-23. They will probably come later. Can we move slides on? Thank you. Is there any questions or comments on high needs review, which at the minute is quite technical?
No hands up, Christine, so I think you can carry on.
Right, next item, just to highlight COVID-19 costs for this academic year. You'll all remember last academic year you could claim for exceptional costs, and there was a short list of exceptional costs that you could claim back from DFE up to a financial limit. There are no exceptional cost guidance for this academic year at the minute. There is a COVID-19 workforce fund, which at present covers November and December 2020 only, and it's designed to cover significant absence costs. If you are considering that, there are prerequisites that you have to meet before you can apply for funding from that. So it's worth having a look at whether you meet those conditions before you do lots of work to try and work out what you can claim from that fund. There's also National Tutoring Programme funding and catch-up premium. So we were due to get some more catch-up premium money for the maintained schools on Friday. That will be distributed shortly. And the academies are due to get their money next week. So that's all we've got on COVID-19 at the minute. So if there is any more guidance come out, we will send information out via the head teacher's bulletin. The next item is just to flag up making tax digital. This has been quite a big piece of work for the authority and the maintained schools. So making tax digital is a significant change to the way we submit VAT returns. So it affects the council from the 1st of April. And because maintained schools are under the council's VAT registration, it also affects them. Very important if you're a maintained school to submit your impress returns for March before the Easter holidays. So they come under the old regime rather than the new one. And from April, May time, there will be a new timetable for submitting impress returns, and there are new templates that we have developed for each of the IT systems that schools use to try and make that process as smooth as possible. Just a reminder about free school meals. The council is funding the cost of vouchers for the Christmas holidays, the February half term and Easter holidays from the DWP winter grant. If you have been buying vouchers or providing food parcels as a school not through the council's scheme and you need to be reimbursed for that, please can you claim your reimbursement for the Easter holidays, because we have to spend the grant by the end of March. And just a reminder that we do have funds available to support families that you might come across that are struggling to pay for food and utility bills, and you can access information on how to do that on the council's website. Hopefully the slide will come up. Yeah, so you go through the pink bar quite near the top of the website and then into the help with finances, food and more. Important to remember that we can help people pay their utility bills, and we are coming across quite a few people who are struggling with utility bills. So if you pick up anything at school and people who are struggling, please direct them to some of this help which is available for them. I think that's the end of my slides. Is there any questions anybody wants to ask?
Thank you, Christine. Anybody got anything? I see no show of hands at the moment. So thank you, Christine. Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. And we'll move then to the next item. So the next item on the agenda, I think, is the DSG management plan update, which I think, Anita, is coming over to you.
It is, John. Thanks very much. Good evening, colleagues. So this is a brief presentation to Schools Forum about the progress we're making finalising the DSG management plan. I'll also be sharing the projections that we've included in the plan and update forum members about our work programme and activities that are in progress at the moment. So since November, we've been working on writing the plan and consulting with key partners and stakeholders. The projections and plan were shared with corporate leadership team and Councillor Bruce in February, and we'll be consulting with other partners during this month before the plan is signed off by Stephen Forbes and Clive Polframan and then published on the local offer. And as members are aware, we did consult with Schools Forum at the end of last month as well. So we've used the projections for the high needs for the high needs block and the management plan based on this budget position for 2021. And obviously it will be finalised at the end of the financial year, but we are projecting the 6.9 million overspend with the potential cumulative deficit of 12.8 million. So I'm just sharing now on the slides our projections based on a do nothing scenario, and the table projects spend from the high needs block over the next 5 years and has been based on our previous 3 years average growth. And if growth continues as it has done previously without any intervention, the council is projecting a 52.7 deficit by 2025-26. So this do nothing scenario assumes an annual increase of the 4 million, approximately 7% from the government. And it's felt it's reasonable to estimate and assume that government will continue to increase funding at similar levels in the next 2 years. Future demand for centre places is also a key factor. The do nothing scenario assumes general growth in demand for centre places will be at the same level as the average growth during the last 3 years. And I'm sure we all agree that these are very worrying figures. So we have also included our projections with an intervention, and this table shows the projections with those interventions, and if the proposals outlined in the plan, which I'll talk about in a moment, are successfully implemented, then we are projecting that we would reduce the deficit to 6.7 million in 2025-26, with the aim really of reducing the deficit further or balancing the books in the following year. In the do nothing scenario that you saw on the previous slide, we did forecast that all in borough specialist provision would be at capacity by 2022-23, but which would cause further costs on those specialist independent special schools. So here this scenario is really focusing on us keeping children local and developing our local provision. So this table details some of the specific interventions that will have a significant impact on reducing the high needs deficit. The success of these interventions are reliant on local provision being able to meet needs at all levels. So, for example, mainstream schools, schools with SEN centres, special schools and local colleges so that we can reduce the number of places in independent special schools. We've also put additional investment into therapy provision. And the last line is assumed that we are using all the DSG blocks appropriately. So on number 8, for example, we've recently charged the SEN Inclusion Fund for early years settings to the early years block. So this slide just summarises the consultation feedback from Schools Forum members. So the Schools Forum, the consultation ran from the 5th of February to the 19th of February, and we had 7 responses in total, 4 primary colleagues, 2 secondary colleagues. And you can see the summary of responses. I'm not going to read those out. We had some really useful comments, which we will reflect upon, which you can see on the slide, things like ambitious plan, clear vision, about the voices of children and young people, reviewing existing outreach offer to support mainstream schools, which were really helpful comments. We do thank colleagues who did send in their comments, and we appreciate that there are considerable other pressures on schools at the moment, so thank you. Just thought it would be helpful to share with Schools Forum the brief update on the SEND and Alternative Provision Transformation Work Programme. So we have actually, through the phase transfer and review of in-year admissions, worked with our special schools and SEN centres and put in 74 additional places for September 2021. Peter Gray has started the review of mainstream funding and inclusion. And we have refreshed the SEND operational board, and that's started to meet. And we've held several workshops to look at options for meeting SEND demand for specialist places in the next 5 years. So we've had an internal workshop, and we've met with special school heads, and we've got a workshop with mainstream schools happening shortly. And a task and finish group has also been set up to review the special school funding arrangements. Right, and I think that's everything from me, colleagues. John, back to you.
Thank you, Anita. Any questions, comments on any of what Anita's presented? I see no hands up. Anita, can I just comment first of all, because I obviously shared a chair with you in this particular group, that I think that an awful lot of work has gone into that, and I suppose the question I would ask colleagues to reflect on is, have those priorities in what we've seen on those slides chimed with our own experiences? Because I think that's kind of what we want to link up, that what you're experiencing, what we're experiencing in our schools, is being met in this in this presentation that Anita's put forward. I don't know if anyone wants to comment, but no, we are.
John, what I would say, I appreciate we've sort of formally finished the consultation, but if this week or next week people do want to drop us a line, because we obviously aiming to finish the plan, but we would welcome any further thought. But I do understand our pressurised situation at school. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Anita, and thank you for the presentation. OK, let's move then to the next agenda item. So the next one is the 2021-22 high needs budget. And Shelley, I think you're picking that one up, aren't you?
Yes, thanks. Could we have the next slide, please, Anita? Yeah, thanks. So the first slide really gives a summary of the overall position for the 21-22 high needs budget. We've got after recoupment, so in other words, after the top slicing for recruitment, we've got a net total funding of 55.9 million. That includes the 100,000 that is being transferred from the CSSB block. This funding also includes 0.9 million of teachers' pay and pension grant, which needs to be passported separately from the high needs block directly to the affected schools. So excluding the impact of the pay and pensions grant, that gives us an 8.7% increase in funding. Now, our budget requirement, having built up the 21-22 budget based on our latest commissioning of places, comes to 60.79 million. So that gives us a projected in-year budget deficit for 21-22 of 4.9 million. And so the budget requirement is 60.79. That's made up of these sort of main categories. The bulk of it is obviously the school-based provision, 46.7 million. Then we've got the other elements you can see there that make up that 60.79 budget requirement. And you can see at the bottom how that's increased since this time last year. We were on 56.5 million. That's now gone up to 60.7 million. So, you know, a very large year-on-year increase. Next slide, please. Thanks. And this one really breaks down the bulk of the costs, which are the school-based provision, into the key categories. And alongside, on the right-hand side, you can see the main causes or the main sort of demand increases that are causing the big changes. So Hounslow mainstream schools, there's about 103 additional pupils we're estimating will be commissioned within Hounslow mainstream schools. Around 74 places on the LA maintained special schools, which gives us 1.7 million increase in spend compared to last year. 15 places on special free school, which gives us about $500,000 increase. And then independent special schools, which is the area we're trying to avoid as much as we can. We've still got an additional 16 places going into that provision, which tends to be on average the higher cost provision. So that kind of gives us an idea of where those increases are mainly coming from. Next slide, please. Thanks. This gives us an overview of the current position on the deficit, which links in with the plan that Anita just presented. So we currently have an existing 5.9 million deficit as at March 2020. The in-year overspend is currently projected at 6.9, which will give us a 12.8 million deficit projected at the end of this financial year, or the end of this month. And then next year, that 4.9 million shortfall, which is included in the budget, would take us to a projected deficit of 17.7 million at the end of March 22. And those are the recommendations, really. So to note, the 21-22 high needs budget of 56.54 million, as proposed by the council and outlined in section 4 of the report, along with the assumptions and risks in determining the budget, and asks Forum to note the projected deficit against the DSG reserve at 31st of March 2022. And obviously this will all need to be addressed via the DSG management plan.
Thank you, Shelley. Any questions, any points, anything anybody would like to raise with Shelley on that report? Okay, I see no hands up, Shelley, so I think that brings us to the end. So let's go to the notes, then things that we are asked to note. So they're on our screen. Shelley's just read them out. So it's note the 21-22 high needs budget of 56.54 million as proposed by the council and outlined in section 4 of the report, and the assumptions and risks in determining the budget. And then note the projected deficit against the DSG reserve as at 31st of March 22, as set out in paragraph 6.4 of the report, that will need to be addressed via the DSG management plan. So I will assume that we're happy to note that unless I see otherwise in terms of the hands up or comments, and just checking through. I can see none, so I think we can consider that we have noted those relevant points. Thank you, Shelley. Great. Okay, so moving forward, we then go forward to the forward plan, which is item 7 on the agenda, and we can see it in front of us on our screens. So the next meeting is on the 21st of June at 5 p.m. And we have the DSG budget monitoring. We've then got the DSG management plan update, feedback from the mainstream send funding review, and so Peter will be joining us for that. And then we've got the schools forum membership on the forward plan. And then in our packs, we also have the future meetings after that on page 30, what must that be? 34, I think this is the pack. So Monday, 21st of September 21 and 22nd of November 21 are the 2 dates in the autumn term next academic year. And we've got one for January, and then the March date is yet to be confirmed. So that's the forward plan. Is there any other business for this meeting? Okay, again, there are no hands up indicating for any other business. Could I make a request, Anita, of you, which is that the document pack, which I think, or rather the PowerPoint pack that you've been displaying, can that be circulated to members after this meeting?
Yes, John, of course. Yeah.
That's great. Lovely. Well, thank you, everyone. It's now 5:58. As we have no further business, can we bring this meeting to an end? Thank you all. Good luck next week when you bring all your children back to school. And I look forward to seeing you at our next meeting. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, John. Good night.
Good night.
John. Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, John. Good night.